Hello, I'm Jim Lineberger. I'm here in beautiful Laurel Fork, Virginia, on the banks of Grassy Creek. My friend and neighbor Noel Quesenberry is here with me. Back in the last century, or actually back in the 1800s, his grandfather owned and operated a mill on this site. The name of the mill was Painter's Mill, and Noel has consented to give us a little bit of his family history, how he got to America, and then discuss the mill, its operation, and what happened with his grandfather as he operated the mill. Noel, tell us about your family and then give us what you know about the mill.
Well, the story starts with my granddaddy buried up on top of the hill here with 4 of his children, one of them being my daddy. And his father and grandfather was buried up on Snake Creek. William, grandpa's father, and Thomas was his his grandfather, and that's as far back in Carroll County as I know. But I do know that the family started in Germany in the 1400s, or the starting of the story was in the 1400s, where he was a millwright that built mills on the creeks of Germany in the 1400s. And at that time, my grandfather must have gotten some of the genes from that man to be able to have put this together. And it's not something that somebody takes lightly to put together something that was as big as this was out here in the country. Daddy couldn't have done it. He wasn't good with driving nails or building things, but somehow or another, my grandfather, Rufus C. Quesenberry, put together the mill here on Grassy Creek. And that was probably about 1885 when he got married and started his family, started the home place up here, and planted this orchard, his grapevines and everything. The grapevines across the front of the old log house that stood behind the present house, and the well was dug there on the home place, and he gave a cow to a man to line the well with rocks. Now this is part of the story that I got from my daddy. And anyway, the mill was built here on Grassy Creek, and part of the story was told to me by my wife's grandfather, Johnny Knighton, who was a lad up the road a couple of miles, a mile and a half probably, above Keno Store. The old Keno Store was probably the focal point of the community here. And Grandpa Knighton, 12 years old, worked for Granddaddy here in the mill and told the story to me of how that feller, pretty notoriety feller by the name of Sidney Allen, logged locust logs in after the mill was constructed. And the sawmill part of it, they turned out pins that went on telephone poles that the insulators were screwed on for miles and miles of telephone lines through the country. And I'm sure that Grandpa wasn't the only one that was doing the work, putting all this together. But anyway, Grandpa Knighton, a little short feller that I knew till he was passed away a few years ago at the age of 97. was told, was telling the story to me about Grandpa and some of the things that went on here, and of course Dad details every once in a while, not details, but just spur of the moment, speaking to me would come out with something like, on the bank of this creek, years down the road from the mill, there was a log structure in the bank where ice was sawed out of the mill pond and stored for summer's use in the sawdust, buried, insulated in the sawdust. Here behind where Scotty is standing, there was a ice house somewhere in the bank, and the spring house up here beside the stream that comes down from the house. I remember as a lad still standing there, the spring house, and so many things. The mill pond that was up behind me, several hundred feet, helped back the water for the mill that was built, and it was constructed out of logs. I remember back in the late 40s, some of them were still there across the creek. But I don't remember the race that come to the mill. I don't remember the mill. But Brother Dwayne and Jim had found parts of that old mill over there and dug out the pie-shaped cogs that powered the mill, the overshot wheel that was fed water from the mill pond up streams. And of course, a lot of this was put together, and you only imagine certain things about this, but I don't want it to be factual that I said it happened this way, because I am a latecomer. I don't know every detail, but I do know that Grandpa built the mill and was operating the mill here for several years, and the log, the wood part of it, the wood shop was only a part of it, because there was a set of rocks that weighed several hundred pounds that he went to Brushy Mountain next to Roanoke and got those rocks. And they were incorporated into the mill. And how in the world, he had to have some help to put that thing together. Those 100-pound, several hundred-pound hunks of granite was shaped and brought in here and incorporated into the structure, and for the purpose of grinding corn, which was a staple and still is for my taste. And I've enjoyed the corn meal from water mills, and from there in Greenville, we had a water mill there. I have enjoyed the corn meal that my granddaddy would have produced here on the banks of Grassy Creek. And also in my childhood days, I went to Herman Dewey Brady's mill. He had a set of rocks, and it was powered by a steam boiler. I would shell a sack of corn and throw it on the old horse, the saddle of the old horse, and go to Dewey Brady's, and I'd chop a little bit of wood to get to blow the whistle on the old steam boiler. That's part of my growing up here on the banks of Grassy Creek. And I've enjoyed these 71 years of memories, and really harvesting the fruit of my granddaddy. The apple trees, I've enjoyed the apples, the grapes that I still press from the plant that he planted more than 125 years ago. Not too many young men, or old men in my case, can tell the stories of their grandparents that far back. And I've enjoyed the life here. Coming back from Greenville, South Carolina, we came 2 years ago, and I settled in the old house that I was born in 1942. And I've enjoyed the fruits of my grandparents. I have to, and it's not a chore. Mow the grass at the family cemetery, but it's not a chore. It's enjoyable. Keep everything going here these last several years. And I'll do it again as long as I can, keeping everything going here. Above Jim's house, the old house, stood behind the house that I now live in. It's long gone, about 1936. I think the house was tore down, and my present house was built there in front of that site. But you know, I don't understand, like I was talking a while ago, I don't understand how one man can come up with a plan to build something unless it is ingrained in his mind. And of course there was other mills around that he could have got the ideas and probably borrowed a lot of brains to put things together. You can borrow brains, but you can't borrow character. And that was part of his life, was the character of a man that put everything together. He buried 3 children up there in their infancy. But Daddy survived. His brother, Bonnie, and I enjoyed his coming to see us and visiting with us. But Daddy's 2 brothers and a half-sister survived childhood days and grew to be older people. Daddy was 83 when he passed away in 86. Preached his funeral and buried him there on the hill out from the house. And as a lad, I could look up there from the cemetery and see 2 millstones that was left from the old mill. I'd oftentimes look over the hill and wonder about those. They were owned by another man at the time, and it was on Sam Color Place. Sam passed away. His daughter acquired the place, and for some reason, I don't know what happened, but the IRS had a tax sale, and Charles Webb bought it and offered me the millstones. But I didn't get a wreck truck or somebody to come and drag them back up the hill and to where we could stand them up in the driveway or put them out to the cemetery. I wished that I could have done that. I wished I'd taken time to have got those millstones, because they were hauled in by Grandpa on a wagon, no doubt, back in 1886 and incorporated into that mill. I'd give anything if I'd took time and the money that it would have took to got them up the hill. It would have been worthwhile to have had them up on the home place. Another thing Grandpa done, but this is another story. He'd walk up the hill to the house, and somebody'd be waiting on him to make him a pair of shoes. He was a shoe cobbler. We had some of the things, the tools for the shoe cobbler. I can remember as a lad the shoe molds, the wood molds for different shoes, and people would be there wanting a pair of shoes, and he'd pick the mold out, the proper size mold, and incorporate, or he would put that pair of shoes together for the man, and sometimes he'd stay all night and leave the next day with a new pair of shoes. That'd be a tough walking in a new pair of shoes made with tacks and awls. They sewed the shoes together with an awl. I don't know if anybody ever knows what an awl is, but it's a sewing machine made with a handle on it that you run the thread through and lace up the sewed part, and tacks were used to nail the soles on it. And we got the last and staff up there. One of the few things that I can say belonged to my granddaddy. But there was a lot of stuff up there when I was a lad that I remember. I remember a cradle, and I don't know who got it, a left-handed cradle. My granddaddy, myself, and my daughter, Cindy, are the only three people that I know that was left-handed in the Quesenberry family. But Grandpa's old left-handed cradle was hanging in the granary up there. The last I remember seeing it. And the equipment, the shoemaking equipment, I saw that. And a spinning wheel and a loom was up in the top of the granary that was pushed over and buried in the hillside back in the late 40s. I remember seeing those things. They'd been wonderful if I could have been able to save them. But old stuff wasn't important to Daddy. It's kind of a sad situation to think that somebody wouldn't think that stuff belonging to the previous generation wasn't important to you. But Dad was like that. I'm not belittling him for that. He was living in the present time. He worked hard. And he was a cradler. He championship cradler, short. He'd bend in. I remember him bending in and swinging that cradle in the oat field or buckwheat, using that. But that was Grandpa's son, Rufus Winton Quesenberry, and Grandpa was Rufus C. And of course, in those days, vivid memories of my childhood was up here on the hill above Jim's place, and that's about the extent of the story that I know, that I lived to see and knew from fond memories of being up there on the hill as a child and walking down the hill to the stream here and playing in the creek where Grandpa's mill was at.
Noel, tell me a little bit more about that log house your grandfather was in. I wasn't aware there was another one before yours. Where was that?
It was behind the house that I now live in. It was tore down about 1936, and Daddy was working on the parkway and got the lumber off the parkway and built our present house. But Grandpa's old log house stood there in the backyard of our present house. The road came from the path down the hill to the mill here, and I walked that path. It was a little bit of a road, very little of a road. Of course, back in when the mill was here in 1886, approximately the time that it was built, there was a road, a wagon road that came down the hill, and right in behind, I think, well, it could have turned up above us here and went across the creek to the mill. The mill was behind where I'm at now, and the mill race came down from the pond above it. I used to love to fish from a log that stuck out over the creek that had washed into the mill pond and got stuck in the mud, and the creek washed the mud out from under it. And I'd get out on that log and catch a string of fish, and take them back to the house. We had fresh trout.
That's right where we're standing, where you were fishing, right?
Yeah, and sure was. And up the creek, the old mill pond was where the log was at.
My son Rob, when he was 9 years old, fished right down there and caught stuff in a stream for the first time in his life. And we'd cook them up on a little outdoor grill we had there. Some really good memories for us here.
Yeah, but one time I had caught a string of fish, and I got back to the back door, and Mama said, "Get in here, the game warden's after you." And I saw his car parked in the driveway up there, but I didn't know at the time that Ed come to the doctor of cow. He was a veterinarian, and Mama made me lay under that bed for a long time before she'd let me out. I had caught that string of fish about 2 weeks before season opened. And
hiding out, huh?
Hiding out. But those were the memories of here on the Grassy Creek. But Grandpa's old house up there, the log house, was built sometime about 1886. The well had the date in the concrete there that furnished them with water. Found a miniature bucket of water out there. The rock lining in there beat the bottom out of our well bucket. So anyway, that was fun growing up here on the banks of Grassy Creek, playing in the creek. My brother said that he'd come down here and take his bath on Friday night and put his courting clothes on and take off walking to see his girlfriend. That was back in the 40s. He was married to Carol Stanley about 1953, I believe.
Is this
52.
Dwayne you're talking about?
No, that's John,
Oh,
my
okay.
oldest.
All right.
Dwayne's the one that helped you dig out the piece.
Yeah, I knew who it was,
Of
but
the
I wasn't
mill.
sure who you were talking about,
Yeah,
whether it
well,
was John or Dwayne.
John was the one that told me about coming down here and taking his bath Friday night.
Because
in the
Dwayne's told me
rapids.
about that too, that he's come down and
Yeah,
taken a bath.
Yeah, we played in that creek a lot of times. Me and my nephew Ronnie.
Tell me a little bit more about the operation. I mean, it did ground corn, and then
they
it
had the woodworking shop.
where it turned wood.
Turned wood, sawed, had the sawmill and everything incorporated into that.
So it was really three operations: grain grinding, wood turning, and wood sawmill.
Yeah, right. Had the sawmill there, and wife's granddaddy, Johnny Knight, helped him as a lad and told me a lot of this story of how this was built. And from there, all of it is history to me. I can't think of anything but concerning the spring house and the place where they stored ice. You know, I wrote down here some things, and one of the things was, what does global warming have to do with the story? It has got warmer, because you don't get a block of ice out of this creek now to store for summer's use. So evidently it has warmed up a lot. I remember the days in the house that we live in where the water bucket would freeze sitting on the counter during the night, and you could pick the water bucket up with a dipper handle. But a lot of things have changed. No doubt will continue to change, but these memories are instilled in my childhood memory of the stories I've heard from my dad and from my wife's granddaddy, Johnny Knight, and I've enjoyed living here at the home place, and hopefully things will continue right on for another few years.
You mentioned that that your family was in Germany in the 1400s. When did they actually come to America?
Probably in the late 1600s to eastern Virginia. There was a lot of Quesenberries that settled in that part, and from there they went into Floyd County and Pulaski County. Back in there was a lot of us settled, but von Quesenberry, I think, was the name of the man from Quesenberry. The von means from, and I've seen a picture of the old house place in Germany. A lady in Virginia that her dad was from Floyd County. Done the research on that. Sometime I might find it important enough to get the book that she published on the Quesenberry family from Germany. And I have some of the history at the house, but sometime around 1600s, I guess, late 1600s, they came to Virginia from England.
When your family came over to America, do you remember the names of, how far back do you remember the names of the people?
Well, as far back as I know was Thomas, He was the father of William. William was my grandfather's father. Uh, Both of those are buried on Snake Creek. One of them is Thomas was buried in the yard of Colonel Martin. When Grandpa built the mill, there's a fellow by the name of Ben Bowman that loaned him the money to buy the materials for the mill. And anyway, Grandpa borrowed the money, and whenever it got the mill working, Ben says, well, the first one gets able to buy the other one out. And Grandpa, in effect, said, well, you can buy me out right now. So he went to Colonel Martin's house and borrowed the money to pay old man Ben off, and got the mill for himself that way. Ben's money wasn't involved in it. So Colonel Martin was married to one of his nieces, I think. It was Penelope. Colonel Martin married. He was Civil War colonel, and pretty established on Snake Creek. Got a beautiful old home place. A few people have tried to make a bed and breakfast out of toward Hillsville. And of course, on beyond there is William, buried in the cemetery on a hill that goes down to Sunnyside Store, the road there on the hill. But then William's children, a lot of them are scattered different places. But I don't know of any of Grandpa Thomas's children other than William. That was my great grandfather back those days. It's hard to keep up with all these things, but Thomas was buried there at the Martin home place with about 3 or 4 other folks there in the edge of the woods. It's a good place to go look for history. There are dates there on the tombstones, and of course, this story I came up with a few years ago. There was Grandpa William was a die-hard Democrat. He had children that were Republicans. Uncle Ike and some of them, Grandpa's brothers, were Republicans. Kind of like integration or segregation. They segregated themselves. The Republicans on one side of the cemetery spelled their name with an E, Quesenberry, and the Democrats spelled it Sin. Berry. I kind of made a joke out of this, but you can look back in history, and Walt and Claude and Will and all those folks were diehard Democrats. Here comes Daddy and Grandpa that was Republican. And it's right funny to tell this story, but I hope it will be to you folks. But
you mentioned that your wife Linda's one of her relatives helped with this.
Yeah, Grandpa Knighton died a few years ago at the age of 97. Probably 12, 13-year-old boy that lived up above Keno's store would help Grandpa, and the mill they'd sack up pins, saw them out, shape them, and thread them here at the mill and put them in burlap sacks and load them on the wagon, haul them to Mount Airy, put them on the train for wherever they're supposed to go. I don't know how many was made, how many crossed the country, but that was produced here in the mill, the woodworking shop, Grandpa's mill.
What about Linda's family? When did they come here? Do you know?
I have no idea. I know her grandfather's mother is buried up there on the hill above Keno's store. He's buried below the mountain, but the Knighton place was there off Keno Road.
How did your family come to not operate the mill anymore?
Well, Grandpa, I don't know. I don't guess I even told that. Thank you, Jim. Grandpa was working at the mill and had the help of a largin feller. Well, he had sold a pig to the largin guy, but he hadn't paid him. Grandpa took his pay took the pay for the pig out of his pay, and the largin guy picked up the log turning candlestick and hit Grandpa in the head. He died 3 days later at the age of 49 years old. This was 1906, and Dad was orphaned at 3 years old. Grew up without a daddy, and I thank you, Jim, for reminding me of that part of the story. A very important part. Daddy and his brother would tell me stories about their childhood. The rock underneath the granary up there, for instance, in passing one day, he said me and Vonnie cracked walnuts on that rock, and there was, it wasn't like children now that has a dad that plays with them and takes them on picnics and things. I don't know how it would be. I sincerely don't know how it would be to grow up without a dad.
Tell me what a candlestick is. I mean, I know that's
Well,
not
it would
doesn't
be,
hold a candle.
It's got a candle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right or not, but it's got a shaped hook on the bottom, on the end of the stick, that hooks in the log that you can prise over with. Turn it over, turn the log over. When you're milling you have to have one of those to turn the log and push it back into position to make the next cut on it. But they were used to turn the logs over onto the mill for sawing. But it had a hook in the end of a curved rod that would bite into the log, and you could use the pole end of it to do your handling of the logs.
About how long would it be?
About 4 feet, not much more than 4 feet long.
With a metal hook?
Most of them were pretty hefty for turning.
Now, what happened to the mill after your grandpa was killed?
Evidently, the painters bought the property here from grandmother. Back in those days, money was hard to come by, and evidently she had to sell off part of the home place. The mill was part of that, and the painters took it over. But it wasn't long after that till it fell into bad times, hard times, and from there on it fell into the marsh, or the flood came or something that destroyed the mill. But parts of it can be found on the other side of the creek from where we were sitting.
Yeah, I've found many iron rods anchored into the ground, and then several of those cog wheels you're talking about. And
yeah, I'd like to have one of them, but maybe one of these days we can dig it out.
Well, I've got a metal detector. We're going to try to find it as soon as we get a chance to get over there. There's one piece I found over there that it's got a bunch of prongs on it, almost like a cultivator. I don't know what that is. Unless it's something to run corn down the belt to the end or something.
Well, I don't know. Most of the mills had a flared out hopper that you poured the corn into, and funneled it in to the middle of the rocks, and from there it was slung in between the rocks and ground into a fine cornmeal. And I remember seeing Dewey Brady adjust that. There was a peg that stuck out on the side of the box where the meal came out of. The rocks were in behind the box, and the meal poured out down a chute into that box. And he'd take his scoop and measure out his part for doing the work. And my wife has got a little toll box, they called them, in a paddle that they'd scoop that cornmeal up out of the box and fill the toll box up, and whatever size sack of corn you had, you measured out your toll, the part that you kept for yourself for doing the work. And that's the way most people up here, they swapped work. I know my daddy stacked hay. He and I stacked a stack of hay out on this east side of the house back in the early 70s. I got pictures of me and Daddy stacking that stack of hay. The last stack that I remember putting up here on the home place. I know Daddy one day left for the stockyard before daylight on Wednesday morning. Brother John says, I'm not putting up hay on the 4th of July. So he gets busy and mows the hay down on the 3rd. What's this, the 3rd? This is 4th, isn't it?
We're on the 4th of July.
This is 4th, so the day before, several years ago, Brother John mowed down the field of hay on top of the hill and got the neighbors in there that afternoon, late that afternoon, and we put up 4 stacks of hay on top of that hill before nightfall. And Daddy came home that night and couldn't believe his eyes when he saw those 4 stacks of hay in the moonlight put up, and deprived him of putting hay up on the 4th of July.
Noel, we mentioned this as the 4th of July, and it's 2013. On the 6th, I'm going to be attending your family reunion. Been to several of those. They're really big affairs. Give me a little history on that, about how long they've been going on. And
well, that's recent history. I can't remember that.
Okay, all right.
No, it's been going on for something like 20 years. I know one of those years back in probably 2000, I had a real bad colon problem, had blood clot in my leg, and went to the hospital the 1st of July, got out the 3rd, had to cancel my cookout that year. But several years now, we've invited our family on both sides, my wife's family and my family, and neighbors. We're going to have this year. We'll have a Swedish fella from Sweden coming. He's visiting with Dave that bought my sister's part of the home place. He had to go to Sweden to retire from his job with Volvo, so I thought maybe he was pretty high official with Volvo company, bringing that friend, and Jim, whoever you can bring with you, you're welcome to do so, but hopefully we'll have enough food cooked up to feed everybody. We usually have 70 or 80 family and friends, and we enjoy the barbecue and the fellowship more than anything. I'm doing it for the fellowship, bringing people together, get to know each other, and I've known so many people down through the years. I hate to lose any memory of those folks. That's been a vital part of my life, but try to bring as many of them together as I can on that Saturday after the 4th most of the time. But
I've never left there hungry, I'll tell you that. And
well,
that pork shoulders and chicken stuff you made is some of the best I've had too, and there's all kinds of food there. We really enjoy that.
Yeah, the ladies, whoever wants to fix a covered dish and bring it in and help feed the get together. I furnish the meat, some of the other stuff, but we have a good time and enjoy each other's company. I've never had any problems other than children playing. They might get in a scuffle, but we have a good time.
Yeah, you've had a gospel group there in the past that was really good too.
nephew Scott's going to have to work. And he got a church group there. I've got some friends that I've invited. Last year it was so hot that people didn't feel like doing a whole lot. So we didn't have any singing last year. I invited the Marshall family up, and maybe they'll be here this Saturday and have some gospel music.
Well, Noel, I'd like to thank you for coming down here and giving us this information about Painter's Mill. Do you know what it was called before Painter's Mill?
Well, it would have been Quesenberry's mill.
I thought it might be, but I don't remember ever having that knowledge.
Well, it had to be to start out with my granddaddy building it.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time when you're getting ready for your big reunion and giving us this information. So hopefully it'll be there for people to view and enjoy for years to come.
Hopefully the rain will hold off.
Yeah, we fought the rain and the high water in the creek and everything trying to get this done, but we improvised, and hopefully my brother Scott, who's the production manager, will make it into something that we'll enjoy watching.
Thank you, Jim.